Hey there, Wargamers. Austin here with Death Ray Designs, and on the 12th day of Christmas, I get a surprise challenge. So, I'm standing at the table here, and I have one of the Warp Strider large window walls in front of me, and Justin has informed me that my challenge for the 12th day is to come up with a tutorial on how to paint stained glass for this window wall. And after approximately 30 minutes of thinking, I think I've got a plan, which involves getting a clear piece of plexiglass, cutting it exactly to size, which just for the sake of you guys being able to do it at home, this is 1/8 inch clear acrylic, which is plexi that you can get at Lowe's or Home Depot. And my thought process is that if I can mark this while inside, and I've cut it super snug so that it just barely fits in here. So let's get the top off of this. So this should just barely slide in. So that should be held in really tight. And now I'm gonna have to mark out where all the things are, pull it back out, and start painting on top of it. So, question is, how do we mark it? That's a tricky one because you don't want to use like a pencil or a Sharpie or anything like that, especially because it might smudge on the way out. And on top of that, you're probably going to want to put something on it to prime it. Now, that could be a variety of things. You just need something to make it stick. Now, the thing that jumps to mind for me is a matte varnish. Matte varnish will stick to the acrylic, it'll bond really well, and you can paint on top of it. So if we go with something like a window froster, that'll give us the texture and the grip to actually put paint down on top of it. And we'll also know exactly where everything is because the rest of the frame of the window will block it and mask essentially. So for this, there's just enough of a wiggle room that you want to come in behind each of the windows. I'm going to press forward and make sure that it kind of like snaps in place and is held up against that. And then, so as we stand right now, we've essentially got a clear window in here, which if you guys ever want that, this is really simple to do. If you want clear windows, you can just go for it by getting some plexiglass from Lowe's or Home Depot and using a bandsaw or a table saw. Make sure you wear eye protection and get it all ventilated and everything because little acrylic chips are nasty. But I think that if we do this and we use tints, essentially like ghost tints from Minitaire or candy coats from Tamiya or whatever you want, that we might be able to mark it with a matte finish to see where we're going and then go back in and tint it and come back in with a fine black like liner brush and come in around everything and break it up to look like the leaded glass, stained glass windows that you'd see in a cathedral. I think this is an awesome challenge, by the way, because I'm super stoked for Sisters of Battle, which I hear sadly is coming much later next year than I thought, but this will give me plenty of time to get this technique down, and hopefully we can learn about it together and figure out the best way to do this so that you can do it too on whatever glass windows you've got in your terrain to make it you know, super cool for when the Sisters come out. So I've gone ahead and done the first part of our plan here. We've got the plexiglass in here and we've pressed it up against the front here. So as you can see in here, we've got our plexiglass and there's a little bit of a gap around it just for clearance sake, but we're gonna use it to our advantage in this situation because we can push it here, keep it pressed up against the filigree form, spray our window froster over it, and then when it's time to take it out, which is right now, we can press against this to get it back away from the form. And then when we slide it up, hopefully it won't scrape all to pieces. Okay, so check that out. You can see all of the little pieces and filigree that we had on there pretty clearly. Now we have a roadmap for where we want to put our leading and our color. So I've got a little bit of a plan, and I'm going to start doing our lead lines first. I've got some FW ink here to begin with. Like you've probably heard me say in a million tutorials at this point, this stuff is super, super opaque. So some of the places that we want to add some line letting in are, we want to do some circles in each of the 4-leaf clovers. And we're also going to try to do kind of a double archway in each of these verticals, and then a vertical line that comes down all the way to the bottom. Time to freehand some circles. I'm going to try to keep this really thin at the beginning because I know I'm not going to make a perfect circle. And that way when I thicken it up, we can edge it towards looking a little bit better each time. Okay, so there's circle number 1 done. I'm feeling pretty good about that. We might come back for a second pass if that's not quite opaque enough, but I think it's probably going to be okay. So let's also try to do one of our archways. I'm going to come down about to here. I'm going to do a little bit of marking first. We're going to mark where it's going to land at the edges. Then we're going to come up here and mark the points of our peaks. I know those are probably a little hard to see at the moment. There we go. There's one. And let's get that one. I'm going to come from the other side. Okay, so there we are. We got our basic double arch going on. And if you go off of the area that's frosted, that's okay. It's behind where those other pieces are going to be. So just going to do our best to try to shape this up, make it look the best that it can. Gotta make all those little Bob Ross noises. All right, there we go. Now it's arching out a little bit. Okay. All right, I'm liking that. So now it's time for the straight line test. So let's see. We're going to keep it really thin at the beginning here because we want to have a little bit of wiggle room on either side to try to straighten that out as we go. Okay. So I'm going to fuss over these edges just a little bit here. Then we'll move on to the next steps. So when it comes right down to it, the part that really matters is the part that is inside, that isn't the lead lining, it's the actual glass pieces. So I'm thinking that's looking pretty good there, though I think that it's a little bit unrealistic that you'd have a glass piece cut that way. So maybe we should have these pieces come straight up to sort of the shoulders of that. And that feels a little better. Yeah. Doesn't feel quite so abrupt now. Okay, so we've got a lot of repetition to do here, so I'm gonna do a little bit and we'll check in a sec. So we've laid out a handful of ghost tint colors here. I've got purple, and we're gonna start with purple down here on these areas. And I'm just gonna try to fill those in. Hopefully this will just go on nice and easy, and it's not really gonna matter so much if we get it on top of the black because it should just stay black. So we'll just do that. Okay, it's actually going on really nice and thin here. And even, which is the most important part. I'm also sort of pulling all the way down as I go, just because it's not going to matter if it goes off the page a little bit here, because that's all going to just get covered up by the MDF frame. It's maybe one of those things that we want to do a couple of coats of just to intensify the colors. Once we get a coat down, we can check by holding it up in front of a light and just seeing how much color actually transferred. Okay. So this definitely is going to need a second coat. I'm going to try to go back over some of the leading here all around, and at least just get sort of a consistent edge so that in case it does start showing a little bit, we know that we'll have a consistent effect. Well, guys, we tried. It's not working out how we planned, so this challenge is going to have to take a little bit of a left turn. We've got candy coat down on the purple areas that we wanted, but it is looking like a seriously hot mess. And that's not anything to do necessarily with the fact that it's impossible. It's totally doable. It's just that it's a difficult process. So difficult, in fact, that I needed way more planning, and that just didn't happen. So we're gonna pivot and go to something else. I've made a new plan, which is this. This is way cleaner, and I know that it's using a tool that you guys don't have at home. I was hoping to make this tutorial something that you guys could follow along with, but that's just not necessarily going to be the case if we want to get the cleanest result. So we're making these, and they'll be on the site if you want to pick one up. You can also just try to do the initial technique that we were doing, but it's so difficult. It was really tough to do, and there's probably some other tricks and things that we could have employed, but we didn't have time to develop them or figure them out or research them enough for this challenge. So we're going with the tried and true, if you need a thing, laser cut it approach. We've made a clear piece of acrylic here with a coat of black paint on one side, and we've engraved out all of the lovely stained glass lead lines that we want, and we will be dropping color into each of these areas. We put a matte coat down over the whole thing, just the one side, not the shiny, nice, clean side on the back. In fact, we probably should have left the original protective coating on it, but this should be an interesting way to tackle this at this point because it's just paint by numbers. You pick your region, you get some candy coat on your brush, and you just sort of touch it into each of the areas that you want. And it should flood out into the surrounding area and give you a nice even result as opposed to the very blotchy results from our initial attempt. So without further ado, let's try to put some paint on this one. We're gonna start off with purple in that same area in this set now. So we're gonna try to paint inside the lines. And now that we've got some little walls, we can actually flood it pretty well. Just trying to use the capillary action of the paint to help get it to creep into all the corners here. Okay. Because we can put it on so thick this time, I think that we can get this almost probably in one go. We just have to be careful not to touch any of the stuff that we've gotten wet now. Places where you see it's gotten over the edges, I'm not too worried about that, mostly because I think that if it does show up at all in the final product, we can always go back over the little lead lines with black, and it'll be a lot easier to hit it more precisely now because it's raised. So we've got a pretty thick coat down here on the purple, and next section up here, I think that we're planning on doing blue in these kind of like little bird and wing trios on top, and then we're going to do yellow in the little halo arcs at the top of the archways. So let's go ahead and do our blue next. This one we're using plasma fluid. Another Miniature ghost tent, but obviously you guys pick whatever colors you want. We're gonna try to do the exact same process here, but we definitely do not want to touch the purple, because then it'll start mingling, and that is not what we want. If you feel that it's gonna be difficult for you not to get the colors to mix on the piece, let the first layer completely dry before moving on to the next one. That'll help mitigate that significantly. So we've got some Ghost Tint yellow now, and we're going to start filling in all the little halos up top. Hopefully with some of these lighter colors, it'll be easier to get the correct saturation here. I'm hoping that it's not going to take quite as much to darken it to the point where it's looking right. And once again, trying very hard not to accidentally mix wet colors on the piece here. Just relying a lot on the capillary action of the paint to pull it into, oh, see, there we go. See, there's the problem. Should have waited on that one. Okay, so in this situation, here's what I'd do. I've cleaned and dried my brush. We're gonna come in here, we're gonna try to just pull out as much of that as we can. Go back and do that a couple of times until we've emptied out that well, and we're gonna empty out that one as well. Just so we've got sort of a okay starting place again for these two. Take a tiny little corner of a paper towel and try to dry off the area sort of in between there so that it doesn't have something to break the surface tension and draw it back across that top gap. We've got some Ghost Tint Fresh Blood, and we've got a whole bunch of teeny tiny little triangular sort of pieces that we're going to tackle next. So here we go. I'm going to attempt to just keep dropping more of it in one spot and force it to work its way out to the edge. Come on, you can do it. All right, fine. It doesn't want to pull all the way into the tiny little corners, and you don't want to have little bits of still white light showing through. So I'm going to cover those up. So we're going to do these little triangles, but we're going to avoid the circle in the middle. So we're going to come back with another color for that. You can see we got all the red down. It's not all the way dry, but we gave it a few minutes to go ahead and get a skin on it so we wouldn't get any more cross-contamination. Now we're gonna start working on the little flowers in our design. We're gonna do yellow petals with blue centers. And we can go ahead and do that all on those as well, so let's get to it. So we've got all the yellow down now for all of our flowers. And we still have the centers of the flowers and a handful of, they're probably a little hard to see, little circles within our design. And I want to do all those in blue. This should be a pretty quick step here. Shouldn't take too much time at all. And because it's round and doesn't have any corners, it shouldn't take much to pull it into all the little recesses here. So we've got our blue dots in here now. And I think that in the same way that we did our red sort of triangular spacers on all of the arched windows, we should do red in these little spacers out here, followed by probably going to do purple on the little pie slices around the floor, and then we're going to do a special white and gray technique for that. So let's start off with our red here, start working these little side panels here. And it's a little hard for me to show you on camera my little quick progress checks, but periodically I'm picking this up carefully not to tilt it as to slosh any of the wet paint around, and I'm holding it up to a light just to see how we're looking. So it may look a little messy on the back right now, but the front is looking really, really clean, and we will get a really nice result on that side, and we can clean up this side pretty easily by just tracing back over some of the spots that need to be black that are actually exposed from the back. So we're done with the red on that ring. We're on to the purple. We are racing towards the finish here. I'm really excited to see how this looks when it's done. I think it's going to be super, super cool. And I hope that this backside cleans up as easily as I am anticipating. I think that that'll really help give it a nice polished, finished look here. As you can see, the Ghost Tint Fresh Blood looks really hot pink here, but over on the rest of this where it's already dried, it's definitely dried into a much more blood red color, and that has a lot to do with the acrylic medium that it's suspended in. It tends to give it more of a pastel white sort of color, so red plus a bunch of white is going to equal pink. That's all the purples. So now that we've got the purple done, all that we have left is the fleur-de-lis in the center. And because we wanted to stand out a lot, we're going to do it in kind of a weird white, and we're going to take this opportunity to do some shadowing. We mixed up a shade in a previous video that was some FW black ink and a lot of matte medium to give this kind of gray smoky tint. So what we're going to do is go on the undersides of each of the pieces, or one side in particular if it's split right to left. So let's start over here, and this is going to be less of a fill wash and more of us just painting this in. We're going to try to be really careful here and only hit the areas we want and nothing more. We just want sort of a light differentiation. I think we're going to pick the left side here. It'll be the right on the other side. So that is to say, when you flip it over, it'll be the mirror, obviously. Okay, and then the underside of this little band here. And I believe that's it. So we're gonna let that dry and then we'll check out what we've got. So now I'm pretty sure we've got everything done except for re-blacking the lead lines on the side that we've been painting from. So now we get to see how we're looking. That's looking pretty excellent. So now let's drop this in. I realize we still have to do the blacking out on the other side, but to avoid scraping any of this off, what I would recommend is trying to pull it this way, so that whichever way your flat surface is, so that it's, if anything gets scraped a little bit, it's just that flat surface. Let's see if we can pull this towards us a little bit more. And let's see if we can just get that seated. There we go. That's looking pretty excellent. Yeah, I'm honestly surprised at how well that turned out. I'm really excited. I think that looks great. Well, Wargamers, here we are at the end of this tutorial, and in fact at the end of the 12-day series. I hope that you enjoyed coming along with us on this journey, and for this particularly interesting challenge at the end. I'm really happy with the way that it turned out, though I think we had some considerable struggles in the middle where we had to really change directions. But these window walls and the small versions for Warp Strider will be available on the site. You can see them and all of the rest of the materials that we used for these tutorials at deathraydesigns.com/12days. All those products are going to be on special pricing through the end of the event and an extra week, because we want to make sure that you get a chance to pick them up while they're on sale. We'd love for you to follow along with these tutorials at home and share pictures of whatever you come up with. Thank you guys again for joining us on this holiday hobby adventure, and until next time, happy wargaming.